From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Let me be very clear. The onus here is on Hamas. And, as Jay Carney just said from the White House, it claims to have the best interests of the Palestinian people at heart, but through its actions, it's showing a far different agenda.
As the United States defends Israel's ongoing attack on Gaza, the Palestinian death toll continues to rise, now topping 20. Israel started drafting 30,000 reserve troops, and a sign the assault may soon widen. We'll go to Gaza to speak with award-winning Palestinian journalist Mohammed Omar, and to Jerusalem, where we'll be joined by Gershon Baskin, who has served as a secret negotiator between Israel and Hamas. Then Oliver Stone's untold history of the United States.
It takes an upside-down, radical view of history, American history in particular after World War II, and looks at it in a new way.
The Academy Award-winning filmmaker Oliver Stone joins us in the studio with his partner Peter Kuznick to talk about their new book and TV series looking at the classified America we were never meant to see. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's continuing to pound the Gaza Strip with airstrikes amidst fears that Israel could launch a ground invasion. At least 21 Palestinians have died in the most recent round of violence, while 3 Israelis died Thursday. Israel said it launched 150 airstrikes overnight, with Palestinians fired a dozen rockets into Israel. Among the casualties of Israeli violence was the 11-month-old son of a BBC Arabic journalist. An Associated Press photo showed Jihad Mishrawi clutching the wrapped body of his baby, who was killed by an Israeli round that struck his home on Wednesday. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney told reporters Thursday, quote, "There is no justification for the violence that Hamas and other terrorist organizations are employing against the people of Israel." Speaking later Thursday, U.S. State Department spokesperson Mark Toner said the onus is on Hamas to stop the violence.
Let me be very clear. The onus here is on Hamas. And, as Jay Carney just said from the White House, it claims to have the best interests of the Palestinian people at heart, but through its actions, it's showing a far different agenda.
Israel's also continued to prepare for a potential ground invasion of Gaza by calling up thousands of army reservists. Egyptian Prime Minister Hesham Kandil visited the Gaza Strip Friday in a show of solidarity amidst fragile hopes he might broker a truce. BP has agreed to plead guilty to criminal charges and pay $4.5 billion to the U.S. government for the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico that killed 11 people and caused the worst offshore oil spill in U.S. history. The payment includes $4 billion related to criminal charges, including $1.2 billion in criminal fines, as well as $500 million in payments to securities regulators. Attorney General Eric Holder said Thursday the settlement broke 2 records.
BP has agreed to plead guilty to all 14 criminal charges, including responsibility for the deaths of 11 people and the events that led to an unprecedented environmental catastrophe. The company has also agreed to pay $4 billion in fines and in penalties. This marks both the largest single criminal fine, more than $1.25 billion, and the largest total criminal resolution, $4 billion, in the history of the United States.
Critics say even the record numbers reflected in the settlement represent just a fraction of BP's profits and will not be enough to deter future disasters. Public Citizen called the settlement pathetic and a slap on the wrist, noting the deal did not prevent BP from continuing to receive lucrative government contracts and leases. Under the settlement, BP agreed to plead guilty to 11 felony counts of misconduct or neglect in connection with the death of 11 rig workers, as well as a separate felony count for lying to Congress. Separately Thursday, the government pursued charges against 3 BP employees for their role in the disaster. The top BP officers who were aboard the drill rig, Robert Kaluza and Donald Vidrine, were charged with manslaughter for their alleged negligence after the government says they became aware of multiple signs the well was unsafe. BP's former vice president for exploration in the Gulf of Mexico, David Rainey, was charged with obstruction of Congress and making false statements about how quickly oil was gushing from the well. President Obama paid a visit to New York Thursday to survey the damage after Superstorm Sandy devastated the region 2.5 weeks ago. Thousands still remain without power as the death toll from Sandy in the U.S. and Canada has climbed to 128. Speaking in the hard-hit borough of Staten Island, Obama pledged to help with both the short and long-term recovery.
So there's a lot of short-term, immediate stuff that has to be dealt with, and we are going to make sure that we stay here as long as people need that immediate help. That's FEMA's primary task. And we'll be coordinating closely with state and local governments to make sure folks are getting the short-term help. But what we've also already heard is that there's going to be some long-term rebuilding that's required.
Top congressional leaders are heading to the White House today to begin talks with President Obama on an agreement to avert the so-called fiscal cliff of tax cuts and spending hikes set to kick in at the end of the year. Obama's vowed to reject any extension of the Bush-era tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans as part of the deal, while Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell Thursday warned he would oppose any attempt to raise taxes. Ahead of the talks, a group of lawmakers led by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders called for a deficit reduction plan that would preserve benefits like Social Security. Sanders spoke during the press conference Thursday.
We're going to send a loud message to the leadership in the House, in the Senate, and President Obama. Do not cut Social Security. Do not cut Medicare. Do not cut Medicaid. Do not cut... I do not often quote Ronald Reagan. That's true. But this is what Ronald Reagan said on October 7, 1984. Ronald Reagan, quote, "Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee. If you reduce the ACO of Social Security, that money would not go into the general fund to reduce the deficit." End of quote, Ronald Reagan.
Texas Congress member and former Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul has given his farewell speech to the House of Representatives. In a more than 45-minute address Wednesday, Paul assessed his own legacy, blasted U.S. policy at home and abroad, and posed a series of questions.
Why can't people understand that war always destroys wealth and liberty? Why is there so little concern for the executive order that gives the president authority to establish a kill list, including American citizens, of those targeted for assassination? Why is patriotism thought to be blind loyalty to the government and the politicians who run it, rather than loyalty to the principles of liberty and support for the people? Real patriotism is a willingness to challenge the government when it's wrong.
Congress member Ron Paul retiring at the end of the year. The Associated Press has revealed a unit of Honduran soldiers accused of killing a 15-year-old boy in May were trained, vetted, and equipped by the U.S. government. Evid Llanes was shot dead by soldiers who chased him when he drove through a military checkpoint on his father's motorcycle. The AP's investigation details an alleged attempt by officers to cover up the killing. It turned out the truck used in the chase had been supplied by the United States, and the unit had been vetted by the U.S. as free of corruption and human rights abuses. A State Department official told the AP this week the U.S. may withhold as much as half of all aid to Honduras for this year out of concern over human rights violations. Meanwhile, two human rights groups say they've submitted evidence to the International Criminal Court regarding targeted killings and other human rights abuses that have taken place in Honduras since the 2009 coup that ousted President Manuel Zelaya. The Center for Constitutional Rights and the International Federation for Human Rights submitted information about the targeted killings of journalists, union leaders, and activists and human rights lawyers amidst what they say is a climate of rampant political persecution and impunity. A new report by Reuters has found the war in Afghanistan has had devastating psychological consequences on Afghans, particularly children who've grown up amidst constant violence. One mental health worker at a hospital in Kabul said many children born around the time of the 2001 invasion suffer from nightmares, depression, anxiety, and incontinence. The news comes as the United States opened talks Thursday with Afghanistan over its continued role in the country after most foreign troops withdraw in 2014. A bribery scandal involving the retail giant Walmart could be widening from Mexico to multiple other countries, the company reported Thursday. The New York Times had previously uncovered how Walmart paid Mexican officials millions of dollars in bribes to win construction permits in Mexico. Now the company says it's uncovered enough evidence to merit bribery concerns about its business practices in China, India, and Brazil. The news comes as hundreds of Walmart workers walked off the job this week to protest low wages, poor benefits, and alleged retaliation from management. Workers have promised a wave of strikes and protests next week, culminating in a massive day of action on Black Friday, the biggest shopping day of the year. The Spanish government has approved a 2-year suspension of evictions for some of the neediest homeowners who are unable to pay their mortgages amidst an economic crisis that's seen hundreds of thousands lose their homes. Spain's mortgage crisis was thrown into the spotlight after 2 recent eviction-related suicides. Spain's finance minister outlined the changes Thursday. The changes to Spanish mortgage law came after a growing mass movement pressured the government to act. But activists said Thursday's reforms still fail to address the issue that Spain's homeowners remain saddled with debt even after they lose their homes. In Ireland, thousands have taken to the streets in protest following the death of a woman who was denied access to abortion. Savita Halappanavar had begged doctors for an abortion after finding out she was already miscarrying her 17-week pregnancy. Doctors refused, reportedly telling her Ireland is a Catholic country. The 31-year-old died from septic shock after doctors finally removed the fetus once its heartbeat had stopped. Ireland, which is some of the world's most restrictive abortion, permits abortion if a woman's life is at risk, but does not specify how severe the threat must be. The Irish government is now vowing to clarify the law. On Thursday, Deputy Prime Minister Eamon Gilmore called for the change before Parliament.
I have said very clearly that we need to bring legal clarity to this issue. We need to ensure that in this country that we do not have a doubt which arises in a hospital, in a set of circumstances which puts a mother's life at risk.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
And Juan, it is wonderful to have you back after back surgery and your recovery. It's great to be sitting next to you.
Amy, it's great to be back. It's been a few months now, and I want to thank all the Democracy Now! Listeners and viewers for all the emails they've sent over the past few days with recommendations from my recovery from back surgery and their own experiences, sharing with me their own experiences of their back problems. And it's great to be back, great to be walking again, because I was bedridden for about a month before my surgery.
Well, it's fantastic to have you back. Maybe we should publish a book of Democracy Now! Listeners and viewers' back problems and how to solve them.
I didn't realize there were so many.